Hello, welcome to Postcolonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and in today's conversation, I'll be talking about one concept, hermeneutics of suspicion. Now, someone had posted a question about it through the channel, and I thought I should briefly respond to it. Now, please bear in mind that I haven't had the chance to read more carefully, so there won't be any specific instances or citations of Paul Ricoeur's work here, but what I'll try to convey is a general understanding of the concept. So hermeneutics of suspicion was a concept articulated by Paul Ricoeur in his 1965 book, Freud and Philosophy. And I'll post a link to the book in the description, and you can read it in your own time. Now, what Ricoeur suggests in discussing Freud is that there are three philosophers that he thinks, even though they come from different fields, that one thing runs through their work, right? It's kind of something that he could trace in their works. So he's talking about Nietzsche, Freud, and Marx. And then what he says is that running through their works, even though they're working in different fields, is a hermeneutics of suspicion. Now, before we go into understanding the term hermeneutics of suspicion, there are two operative terms here, hermeneutics and suspicion, right? So hermeneutics is not just a word, right? It's a whole field. There is philosophical hermeneutics, theological hermeneutics, phenomenological hermeneutics, radical hermeneutics, but all of those fields deal with the question of finding meanings of a text or sometimes outside the text. So if you look at religious or theological hermeneutics, which is also sometimes called exegesis, the role of the theorist or writer or theologian is to approach the text and then suggest that if we read it deeply, there are meanings in a text that may not be apparent to every reader. A hermeneut, or a person who knows how to read biblical texts, will be able to find hidden meanings in a text and hence make the text more intelligible and better understood. So hermeneutics in all its form, in one way or the other, claims to interpret text but with deeper knowledge of the text itself. Now, in the biblical tradition, and you can find this in Terry Eagleton's chapter on phenomenology and hermeneutics, he talks about what he calls the hermeneutical circle, right? So what he means by that within textual reading of a text is that a text is a whole, right? And so you decipher a part of it, right? And then you take that part and run it through the whole and come back to that piece, and you will understand that that one part now means more than what you thought, right? And so that's the hermeneutical circle. If you want to use it in material terms, you can pick up something outside the word, unmentioned in a text, and then run it through the text, and then go back to where you started, right? So that's what is considered a hermeneutical circle. Now, so hermeneutics of suspicion, then, roughly speaking, means that you approach a text not with literal suspicion, but with this idea that a text is more than what it appears to be, right? And a critical reading of it is necessary to find out what it actually means, right? So if you look at Ricoeur's claim, and sorry if I'm misspelling the name, I don't know French, right? So Paul Ricoeur calls Nietzsche, Freud, and Marx, sort of the prophets of hermeneutics of suspicion. So let's think about it. What does Marx do? Marx says, let me read Capital for you, right? And let me give you the underpinnings of what it means, right? That utterances and instances in the material world don't just happen. There are hidden ideologies behind that. So in so many ways, then hermeneutics for Marx would be a sort of an ideology critique. What ideology underwrites what practices. For Freud, it's pretty obvious, right? We see the sign, a person behaving a certain way. In hermeneutical reading is, well, that's not what it means. Let's go deeper and see what psychological traumas drive that kind of behavior. And I'm not pretty sure about Nietzsche, but Nietzsche's whole questioning of Christian morality and everything else is approaching an established way of looking at the world and faith with some kind of suspicion and skepticism. Now, of course, more people have worked on the concept. I mean, if you read Truth and Method by Gadamer, right, he gives us two forms of hermeneutics. So there is hermeneutics of faith and hermeneutics of suspicion. Hermeneutics of faith is pretty easy to understand. It's all what all theologians or Muslim scholars or, Judaic scholars do. They accept the text as sacred and then read it carefully to prove the truth claims of the sacred text. So that's hermeneutics of faith. You're restoring faith through an exegesis, through deep studies of the sacred text. Now, hermeneutics of suspicion, of course, is what undoes the text, right? Deconstructs it. That's why Derrida's deconstruction is considered a radical hermeneutics, right? Because what he's doing is not just saying this could mean this or that. No, he takes the core idea that girdles the text and then unravels it from within, hence bringing the entire edifice or logic of a text down. Right? Now, there are people who have developed new theories and new ways of looking at text through a rereading of Ricoeur's Hermeneutics of Suspicion. And the biggest name that I could figure out after just a cursory research is Rita Fisk. And I will post a link to her book in the description. And she's the one who is built on hermeneutics of suspicion and then gone on to discuss critique and what is critique, what are its main elements, and how it could be useful. So overall, circling back on where I started, hermeneutics of suspicion is a concept theorized by Paul Ricoeur, and then technically, in very simple terms, it means when you approach a text to seek its meaning by a deep reading of the text, you are convinced, or you convince yourself, that the apparent representation or apparent claims of the text are not the real thing, but what is hidden structurally, psychologically, or otherwise between those utterances is more important. Now, do keep in mind that a lot of explanations of the concept are very Eurocentric. Now, if you have read Edward Said's The Word, the Text, the Critic, there is a moment there where he tells us, and I have a video on it too, where he teaches us about the thought prevalent in the 13th century, right, from the grammarians of Al-Andalus, right? And he talks about the Zahiriya and Batiniya scholarship. So in the Muslim theological debates, the Zahiriya scholars were those who said, we don't need deeper knowledge of the Quranic text. We just read what's on the surface because that's what the Quran says. I have made this text understandable. to people. So there is no need for looking for hidden meanings. So the Zahiriya, the apparent scholars believe that just read the text and put it in the context of the word, and that is what it means. Now, Parthenia scholars, the Parthenites, believe that no, there is a hidden meaning in the sacred text, and only the initiated can access it, and you need deeper knowledge. So what Parthenia then they claimed was that by studying the words, their etymologies, their histories deeper and deeper, you could understand the sacred text better. So what I'm saying is that could be termed the hermeneutics of faith, which is centuries before the European philosophers start discussing it. But let's not forget that the European theologians, the Christian theologians, were already using these methods long before the philosophers started talking about this. So overall, without having access to my texts and rereading them, this is my brief understanding of hermeneutics of suspicion. So how would you use it in your writing, in your dissertations and papers? I think most of us already do that without knowing it, because, we challenge the assumptions of a text either as a structuralist, as a post-colonialist, as a feminist, right? The way to do it would be, of course, to read Ricoeur and see how clearly can you understand the concept, and then build on that and read any text. How does it come to be? What are its truth claims? What underwrites it? But reach the text, approach the text with that kind of skepticism, with that kind of suspicion, right? And that's a key point. Instead of approaching a text with this assumption that the text itself is true and all you're doing is exploring it, you approach it as something that has to earn your trust, right? With a certain degree of skepticism. And then you see how it fails its own logic, right? And in a radical form, that would be deconstruction, right? You'll be doing what Derrida does. So it's gotten a little long-winded, but this is my rough understanding of hermeneutics of suspicion. Please do read Ricoeur and make up your own mind. Don't take this video as a final word on the concept. It's not. And let me know what you think. I hope this is useful to you. Okay, I will now see you next time. Until then, be kind and generous, take care of each other, and as always, from me to you, peace and love.